Don't blink, Theron Merrick whispered into his collar mic, gaze locked on the tiered stone dais of the Galactic Council chamber. They won't understand, not yet. He stepped forward. Dozens of species, scaled, furred, silicon-veined, and flame-eyed, shifted in their thrones of floating alloy and bio-woven crystal. The air shimmered faintly under the reactor-fed light strips that coiled like luminous veins along the chamber ceiling. Conversations faltered. A few appendages froze mid-gesture. Theron's boots struck the obsidian floor like a countdown, each step measured but unwavering. Behind him, the Earth delegation, 3 aides and 2 security officers, stood from their curved platform, leaving datapads powered on but communications links severed. He reached the center of the chamber, paused just long enough for his presence to register, then lifted the diplomatic badge from his collar. The silver hexagon gleamed against his gloved hand as he set it onto the speaking pedestal. Click, a small crystalline sound, not loud, but final. Councillor Gurn Tholix of the Vorth Dominion snorted through gill-like slits, a dramatic gesture, human. Shall we expect interpretive dance next? Chairman Viral next, seated in the central axis with 6 retinal apertures fixed on Theron, leaned forward, clawed fingers folding together. Ambassador Merrick. The council is in active session. If you wish to address. Theron turned without responding. The chamber fell into a vacuum of sound, not silence, but compression. As if the weight of the moment pushed all air to the floor, council members blinked. Some leaned in. Others adjusted hologram-embedded tablets. The chairwoman of the Koran Spire twisted her echolobe in confusion. No species among the 247 had ever walked out of a session in progress. A corridor of disbelief followed Theron's path to the exit doors. His security contingent moved behind him in synchronized rhythm, shoes whispering against polished glass ceramic tile. The ornate chamber's illumination flickered subtly as his retinal ident left the system. Behind them, murmurs fractured into arguments. He's bluffing, Gurn muttered to the Laros representative. Typical human dramatics. Their politics run on theater. But Theron never looked back. Beyond the chamber, as the council doors sealed in silence, the broader corridors of Harmonia Prime's capital zone became a network of movement. Earth's embassies, strategically located on the cultural, diplomatic and trade stations of more than 90 species, initiated synchronized withdrawal. Inside consulates, diplomatic staff stood still as encrypted shutdown sequences pulsed across neural lattice consoles. External beacons dimmed one by one. No alarms, no emergency lights, only absence blooming like ink in water. At the orbital ring above Velrath, a small human ship detached silently from Dock 3G. Its ID beacon flickered off mid-maneuver. Local control attempted to hail, no reply. Seconds later, the last 3 Terran ships across council ports initiated quiet departure protocols and faded into cloaked transit lanes. Not a single broadcast, not a single warning. In the dense shadow shell of the Centauri fold, cloaked Earth vessels repositioned across council border vectors, forming a geometric ring outside sensor arrays. No lights, no trace, just space repositioned by calculation. On Harmonia, back in the council chamber, the debate cracked open like splitting stone. Outrageous, hissed Tenak Val of the Spire Worlds. We gave them entry. We shared astrocartography. They sit here for decades and walk out without even words? Their systems are too entangled with ours, whispered Zamfir, internal tech administrator from the Volari Axis. They run half our subgrid protocols. Let them sulk, Gurn said, voice raised for maximum disrespect. The moment they need intersector access again, they'll crawl back. We hold the rotes. We hold the energy cores. But even as he spoke, a heads-up display embedded in the dome flickered, its council-wide personnel chart stuttering. Rows of Earth delegation markers turned gray. Some disappeared entirely. Chairman next stood. He had never stood mid-session before. Pause the current resolution. This situation, his voice wavered, not from weakness, but the creeping awareness of something rehearsed. This situation requires immediate analysis. Behind the dais, his aides frantically adjusted interface bands. A central console chimed with a system notification. One of the 6 primary Earth-linked nodes in the Council's data relay buffer had just severed. Cleanly. No trace, no damage, just off. On the trade world of Cygnus 4, an Earth-operated medical outpost folded operations and disappeared overnight. Council security forces arrived an hour later to find the structure powered down, empty and booby-trapped with looping redirect codes that erased themselves after access attempts. Back on Harmonia, Council Minister Sloke narrowed her compound eyes. "If this is protest," she said, voice low, "it is executed with the elegance of military retreat." In an underground control room on Earth's homeworld, Director Varon Scythe monitored a black glass wall of relay lights. His hand hovered over a tactile interface panel. No flourish, just 2 fingers tapping an ivory-tipped command. Directive Severance, full enactment. Across Council space, Earth's engineers, civilian, military, even student apprentices, dropped their aliases, boarded silent crafts, and vanished behind interspatial corridors. Their host systems, left untouched, would continue to function. For now, the damage wouldn't come from destruction. It would come from dependence. In one of Harmonia's tertiary conference wings, analyst Brel Karive sat before a pulsating readout. He watched as system after system began flagging Earth-originated back-end layers as unresponsive, not damaged, not compromised, simply inaccessible. His brow furrowed. He ran a diagnostic query through a Volari licensed access point. The response came in 6 Council standard seconds. Node architecture validation mismatch, no current authorization pathway. He blinked, then again, and then he whispered to no one, "They're not hacking us, they just left." Back in the chamber, Thalek scoffed as more names dimmed on the central laser plasma display. "So what? They took their toys and went home. We'll rebuild." But Nex, eyes narrowed, murmured, "You don't rebuild what you never understood." On the Earth delegation's now vacated console, a single notification remained. A circular interface light, normally green, began a slow shift. First amber, then a deep crimson, throbbing once every 5 seconds. No audio, no signal, just color. Outside, beyond Council reach, Theron stood aboard a Terran vessel already cutting across slip space. He faced a dark panel, non-reflective, absorbing all light, and said to no one in particular, "It has begun." No more appeals. No more silence. Now they witnessed the weight of forgetting who enabled their comfort. The ship's engines murmured into silence as it breached into a slipfold corridor. Harmonia faded behind them like a dying echo. In the dark chamber of the Galactic Council, where thousands of years of interstellar order had once hummed in confident equilibrium, the red light continued its pulse. The red pulse continued. In the silence following Theron Myrick's exit, that single beacon on Earth's empty delegation console blinked in perfect intervals, like a heartbeat without a body. Chairman Verl Nex stared at it longer than he meant to. Not because it changed, because it didn't. He turned to his aide. "Bring me the sector stability reports. Immediate priority." The aide hesitated, just for a breath before running. Already, something felt off. 2 hours later, across the mineral harvesters of Murith Station, technicians scrambled through control halls, lit only by auxiliary strips. The main power grid refused to stabilize. Fusion cores had begun skipping calibration sequences, sending false red outputs into the station's thermal regulators. "Fail-safe loop won't reset," muttered Senior Operator Desher, wiping condensation off a cracked lens. "It's like the command stream's gone blind." A junior tech pointed at the central console. "Subsystem tags are Terran encoded, aren't they?" "They're wrappers," Day snapped. "Integration layers, not the guts." The console flickered again. No errors, just blank returns. As if the system wasn't malfunctioning, but withholding. On Verlin Colony, a farming moon operated by the Sinari conglomerate, Habitat Regulation AI, began locking doors during sleep cycles. Not randomly. Patterned. Predictable. One module at a time. Parents woke to sealed nurseries. Hydroponic labs dropped temperature baselines to 0, then reversed. The AI offered no verbal prompts, no fallback controls. Manual overrides failed. Sinari security forces attempted to disconnect power relays physically, only to find the units rigged with recursive energy returns. Cut the cord, and the node rerouted through buried reserves they hadn't even registered on blueprints. In the Council's secondary command cluster on Harmonia, Technician Sil Keldron stood before a slanted wall of glowing indicators. His reflection shimmered across the laser plasma diagnostic pane, fractured by cascading alert lines. He typed commands. Every sequence returned the same phrase: validation expired, quantum pathway not found. He tried again using an archived Earth codec. Nothing. He switched terminals. Still locked. Keldron stepped back, hands loose by his sides. "They're not crashing our systems," he said to no one. "They're ignoring us." In the adjacent chamber, members of the Council's Infrastructure Preservation Bureau watched heads-up displays display a slow bleed of failure, comm nodes blinking out, orbital grid calibrations stalling mid-adjustment, cargo beacons lost in open drift. One of the delegates, her carapace clicking as she shifted, leaned in. "Is this sabotage?" "No," Keldron replied, voice thin. "It's engineered dependence." The room fell still. He continued, drawing breath like a man standing too close to the truth. "They didn't destroy anything. They withdrew. And our systems, our networks, our ships, our life support, our navigation trees, they're not breaking. They were never ours." Counselor Runvakel, normally quiet, stood from his platform. "Are you saying Earth-embedded kill switches?" "No," Keldron said. "Worse. They built architecture that only they could speak to. They weren't kill switches, they were silent keys, and now the keys were gone." On Deltras Reach, a starbase orbiting a major trade artery, panic set in. Cargo ships queued for departure found their guidance beacons desynchronized. Docking rings spun misaligned by 2 degrees, making safe departure mathematically unstable. Inside the control room, Chief Engineer Hullrun Door hammered commands into the tactile panels. "Why isn't the sequencer responding?" "Backend's rejecting our updates," came the reply. "Override with Vorth code stack. Already tried. Doesn't register. Fallback protocols, locked to original deployer signatures. They're Terran." Hullrun's voice dropped. "They left us blind." Simultaneously, at Velrun Ascension Tower, a standoff unfolded. The tower's core housed atmospheric regulation for 5 outer dome colonies. 3 Earth engineers still remained inside, gathering personal equipment for departure. Council security demanded access to the core systems. The lead Terran, name flagged as Oren Vale, retired systems architect, refused, standing calmly at the entrance ramp. "You don't have clearance," he said flatly. "You've severed 40,000 citizens from breathable containment," barked the security captain. "No," Oren corrected. "We kept them alive until now. It's your council that never bothered to learn how the valves worked." The guard stepped forward. Oren didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. From inside the tower's comm deck, a shutdown command silently rolled across an insulated terminal, remotely activated. Backup generators dimmed, forcing a choice: storm the building and risk total destabilization, or let the Earth crew finish their withdrawal. The guard stepped back. Word of the incident spread within the hour. On Harmonia, Viral Nex read the incident reports, hands laced behind his back. Outside his window, the planet's orbital ring shimmered with stabilizer lights, a design Earth engineers had improved 5 years ago. He turned toward Counselor Zem Fur. "How much of our grid depends on Earth-originated frameworks?" Zem's face tightened. "More than we ever admitted. Fusion regulation, station comms, long-range cargo indexing, medical synthesizer loops, and no backups." Zem didn't answer. Viral nodded once. "Then we allowed this. Over 2 decades, we became dependent, not by force, by convenience." A signal alert pinged across the chamber. Viral turned to the laser plasma display wall. A new set of systems was dimming. Orvan Array, Spiral Dock 9, Hydros Core Light, all gone dark in perfect rhythm. But it was too clean. No power surges, no tampering, just absence, moving like a curtain being drawn. In a side wing, Gurn Tholex paced the floor, flanked by Trade Alliance officials. "It's a bluff," he growled. "The humans are staging a tantrum." A junior liaison handed him a datapad. Tholex scrolled through system logs. His smirk faded. "This is impossible. These are deep systems. They built them," the liaison whispered. "We just used them." In the diplomatic docks, cloaked ships began to emerge, not human vessels, but council ships, all queued for departure. The message had spread: if Earth systems weren't speaking anymore, nothing was safe, and Earth still hadn't spoken a word. In a control chamber below the Harmonia surface, Sil Keldron reviewed a list of the Council's core dependencies. It stretched for pages. Underneath every subroutine, every critical function, was the same signature, Earth. He leaned back, eyes on the screen. They didn't just leave, he murmured. They took gravity with them. In the command center buried beneath the ice mantle of Delta Prox Enclave, Marshal Vec Tarnal stood at the edge of a sunken viewing pit, arms crossed behind his back. The walls pulsed with soft cobalt light, throwing long shadows across the embedded ops consoles and neural link stations. He didn't speak. The heads-up display to his right tracked 12 Council vessels moving through Sector Varn, a diplomatic envoy, flagged under truce. They were headed for Sol. "They're running standard emissary protocol," said Lieutenant Jarrus from the upper tier. "Broadcasting a peace preamble, signal loops cycling every 20 seconds. "Did we answer?" Tarnal asked, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone around him pause before replying. "No, sir," Jarrus replied. "Per directive." "Good." A map projection unfurled across the central table. The convoy's trajectory intersected grid point T12, an engineered funnel disguised as an obsolete comms corridor. Only Earth's vessels ever used it. The Council thought it abandoned. Tarnal nodded once. "Prepare vector fold. Lock stasis lattice when they hit mid-span." A junior tech flinched, engaging gravitational compression against a diplomatic. "They crossed into our boundary." Tarnal cut in. "They came uninvited. This is containment, not aggression." No one argued. Beyond the reach of sensors, an Earth-embedded device deep within the asteroid shell began to stir. Not a beacon, not a weapon, a gravitational anchor, the kind that didn't emit energy, but redirected how energy moved through space itself. The moment the lead Council cruiser crossed the invisible threshold, a subtle ripple distorted the local field. Inside the Vornhall Light, flagship of the convoy, pilot Mars Quen leaned forward as his nav system blinked. "Drift readings wrong," he muttered, fingers skimming across the helm. "We're burning at Vector 9, but velocity hasn't changed." The co-pilot squinted at the tracking node. "Maybe an external dampener?" "No," Quen said, adjusting course. "It's like the stars outside the viewport seemed to breathe. They stretched, then coiled inward, like someone had folded space around the ship and forgot to leave an opening. Thrusters roared, stabilizers rebalanced, but the vessel remained fixed in place. Movement was gone. Not slowed, removed. "Deploy countermeasures," barked Commander Yesh Toller, standing over the bridge console. "Cycle every frequency. Send broad-spectrum hails." Mars's voice trembled. "We're caught inside something." Back in the Council's strategic core, buried within Harmonia's lower echelon, alerts blared across laser plasma status walls. Red markers pulsed over the projected fleet location. Stationary. Impossible. Councilor Zem Fur stared at the blinking coordinates. "That corridor was cleared decades ago." "Not cleared," corrected one of the analysts. "Abandoned, by us." They watched as all 12 convoy ships remained locked in a perfect formation, unmoving despite full power output. No gravitational anomalies recorded, no impact, no enemy vessels in visual range, but the fleet did not advance, could not retreat. Inside the Vornhall Light, Mars Quen's fingers hovered above the manual override. "We're maxed out on burn, still 0 forward shift. Adjust heading." Already did. "Cycle frequency." All bands. Nothing changes. Outside, the stars twisted again. Commander Toller turned to the comms officer. "Any reply from Earth?" The officer shook his head, throat tightening. Not even an echo. Then the lights dimmed, not inside the ship, but outside the hull, as if the surrounding space was absorbing reflection, rendering their environment colorless, motionless, timeless. "Field compression," whispered Mars. "They've wrapped us." On Delta Prox, Marshal Tarnal observed the readings. The convoy was now in full spatial entrapment, a sphere of suspended inertial gravity locking every molecule of mass inside a variable fold. He lifted his wristband and tapped a secured frequency. The signal traveled not by open channel, but by quantum-entangled relay, a whisper across encrypted threads of subspace, layered through camouflage frequencies seeded years earlier. The message was short: target immobilized, phase 2 secure. In the depths of Varan-Scythe's observation chamber, a soft chime confirmed receipt. Scythe, hidden aboard a cloaked station orbiting the outer rings of the Tyler Fringe, narrowed his gaze on the relay's return loop. No signs of Council counter-response, not yet. He leaned into the neural-linked console, and began logging the exposure data. Every fluctuation in the Council fleet's field output, every rerouted cycle, every blind maneuver. Earth was studying them now, watching how they handled fear when movement no longer obeyed them. Back on Harmonia, Chairman Nex stood before a gathering of high analysts, reading the latest security brief. "This tech," he said slowly, "we funded it." Counselor Runvuckle looked up. "Excuse me." Nex held up the tablet. "Stasis field experimentation. 3 years ago, Earth applied for testing grant under Project GHL-9, said it was for ship shielding. We approved it without further review." Zem Fur stepped forward. "And now it's encased our fleet." "Trapped them," Nex corrected, voice taut. On the Vornhals bridge, static pulsed across comm panels. Butterberto, static pulsed across comm panels. Messages to Earth, pleas for negotiation, offers for dialogue, were launched into the abyss, only to vanish into the silence. Commander Toller opened a channel on emergency override. "To the Terran network, this is a peaceful delegation under Council jurisdiction. Our intentions are non-combative. We request safe passage. Please respond." No tone came back. No data burst, not even an error. The silence had volume. It sat in the room like a verdict already rendered. Quen turned to his console again. "Sir, if this continues, our internal loops will begin to overheat." "Then shut them down," Toller muttered. "No use burning fuel in a cage." Somewhere far beyond the stilled stars, in a surveillance relay barely wider than a transport drone, Earth's hidden eyes blinked. Its AI logged the fleet's reactions, cataloged speech cadence, analyzed stress signatures, calculated political ripple effects. Then it sent a final time-stamped transmission to Earth Command. "Observation complete. Emotional deviation registered. Strategic reversal successful." On Harmonia, within the strategy wing, panic flickered beneath calm expressions. "They're not retaliating," Zem whispered. "No," Nex replied. "They're dissecting." Across the Council's internal message loops, speculation erupted. Was this a threat, a warning, a containment test? Theories scattered across linguistic clusters, but none had proof. Earth had issued no ultimatum, no request, no declaration. They had just acted, and then paused, waiting. Back inside Delta Prox, Tarnal finally exhaled. "Let the convoy stew," he said to his officers. "They need time to feel what we've felt for decades." A junior analyst spoke up, quiet but curious. "What do you think they'll do now?" Tarnal didn't answer. He turned toward the viewport, where black space wrapped the hidden fleet like silk stretched across glass. He didn't need to guess, because whatever came next, Earth had already prepared for it. Even in death, Vorin never screamed. The final recording from his field pod, captured on a static-embedded relay, was silent. No blood, no violence visible, just the slow fading of a biosignal trace on a screen no one had noticed fast enough. Earth did not mourn him in public. There were no parades, no declarations, only a notification sealed to Strategic Command Level 9, Operative Vorin, status unconfirmed, field clearance revoked. Protocol trigger acknowledged. But long before he disappeared, Vorin had seen what the Council refused to name. He began with planet Coro 3A, a backwater world orbiting a red dwarf in a system the Council listed as ecologically irrelevant. Vorin's drop pod hit dirt at midnight, heat dispersion, keeping his landing invisible to native scanners. From the hillside, he watched the lights. Not native lights, Council lights. They pulsed like artificial constellations over tribal villages whose residents still measured time by tide and rainfall. He adjusted his scope. Council-tagged drones hovered above the thatched homes, spraying what Vorin's filters identified as biocatalytic aerosol blends. Immune acceleration, the reports had called it. Behavioral resilience enhancement, another file had phrased more bluntly. He recorded in silence. The villagers, four-limbed, stone tool users with basic glyph scripts, sang songs to the machines. They thought they were gods. Vorin tracked the flight path of one of the drones back to a camouflaged dome buried beneath a ridge. Inside, he bypassed retinal checkpoints using stolen data harvested weeks prior on an unrelated mission. The facility ran with minimal personnel, automated systems doing most of the dirty work. Inside, he found tanks, some filled with nutrient gel and drifting embryos, others lined with skin-piercing neural nodes. One chamber held a species that hadn't evolved vocal cords, being tested for neural misfire correction through synthetic cognition. Each room had its own council project number. He didn't react, not then. Instead, he uploaded the recordings to a field-packaged quantum lattice node, then programmed a neutrino pulse transmission protocol. No standard relay, no satellite handoff, just a beam so buried inside dark matter scatter that only Earth's quantum vaults could recognize and decode the carrier wave. One planet wasn't enough. Voron moved system to system. Jaretta's moon, where he found colonies used as gene sampling reservoirs, Ashari X, where pseudo-deities gifted chosen children to alien labs, and Valin orbit, where non-sentient amphibians had been artificially uplifted, not for preservation, but for combat simulations. Everywhere he went, he collected data, voices, logs, rotations, schedules. He didn't fight, didn't threaten, he documented. His notes were clipped and without emotion. Concord ship Korvax 7, seen transferring captive units, species verified as pre-FTL, no record in Council archives, reports suppressed at administrative level. Behavioral Trial 03.24 involved neural deterioration triggered by sleep cycle deprivation. All subjects deceased, labeled as non-viable data. His final drop point was Shen Vale, a quarantined atmospheric lab wrapped in a biodampening shell. The internal logs showed a council team running adaptation trials for atmosphere strain by putting unshielded pre-contact children into containment chambers and measuring survival time. He transmitted everything to Earth, encrypted, buried deep within the core layers of planets long believed tectonically dead. Then he disappeared. The official report labeled it an environmental accident, gravity well misalignment, field dampener failure, unrecoverable. But Earth surveillance noted that Valthori covert signatures pulsed near Shen Vale's final transmission beacon 1 hour after his last signal. Nothing further came back. In the weeks that followed, Earth's demeanor shifted. Trade discussions paused. Research sharing platforms fell quiet. Routine communications tightened to cryptographic compression ratios that made passive monitoring useless. Inside a black-site data vault beneath Polar Node 4, the full dump of Voron's archive was decrypted. Director Varan Scythe stood alone in the vault's cold chamber archive. Heads-up displays framed his field of vision, each window playing snippets of horrors the galaxy refused to name. "Has Command seen this?" his aide asked, eyes stuck on a playback of a young alien child, dissolving under exposure to forced atmospheric pressure differentials. Scythe said nothing. Instead, he walked to a recessed data socket, opened the secure port, and slid in the access spike Voron had buried beneath 13 layers of locked lattice. The system confirmed, all data authenticated, ethical threshold breached, moral reprisal clearance granted, a new folder unlocked. It contained no commands, just a quote Voron had left embedded in the metadata: "Silence isn't compliance, it's judgment waiting for a verdict." 3 hours later, Earth's civilian-facing systems dimmed. Medical infrastructure exported to Council planets received a silent firmware shift, not destructive, simply decoupled from all shared routing logic. Terran-built navigation scaffolds on outer Council border stations returned an error code when prompted, no valid signature found. Consulates once open to researchers, traders, and aides, sealed with a gesture recognition protocol none of the Council staff had ever seen before. Every Earth-linked external channel flickered once, and then, darkness. On Harmonia, technicians tried every override they knew, but the Terran systems didn't deny them. They simply acted as if the Council never existed. Chairman Nex stood before the Council days, listening to a cascade of reports. Blinking icons filled the laser plasma grid behind him, each one a system no longer under Council control. "We didn't authorize any retaliation," murmured Councilor 4. "This isn't retaliation," Nex said slowly. "It's subtraction." Back in Earth's deep space data bunker, a small display looped Voron's last successful transmission. No sound, just his eyes, looking into the lens, not angry, not broken, resolute. He reached forward to shut off the recording, and vanished. The Council chambers had never been this quiet during a planetary alert. No directives, no barked orders. just the dull whisper of 1,000 heads swiveling toward the central laser plasma display as another system dimmed from the command grid. Terralith Nexus followed by Norian Spinfield and Sector 8B's biostasis core. Their failures stacked like falling dominoes, unaccompanied by explosions, alarms, or hostile fleets, only silence. In the lower galleries, aides clutched datapads that no longer refreshed. Above them, the chairman stood motionless. Viral Nex didn't blink. He couldn't. The room's lighting recalibrated, flickering in a subtle wave from blue to a dull white glow, the color of interrogation chambers, of truths you couldn't deny. "They're not attacking," Counselor Zamfir murmured, staring at the system diagnostics streaming failure logs in real time. "They're removing themselves." "No," Nex said quietly. "They're removing us." A whisper of static crawled across the chamber. Then the lights dropped. Not a failure. A shift. Screens, consoles, heads-up projections. Everything went black. Every device across Council space, from asteroid relays to capital spires, blinked to void. 1 second. 2, 3, and then activation. Every screen lit up. Not in the Council's interface blue or security grid violet. A gray-white light, sharp and untextured, cut through every layer of encryption, every firewall. On Harmonia's central tower, diplomats froze mid-step as the entire spire's outer skin lit up with projection streams. There was a face, Vorin, half-lit, half-corrupted. His image flickered across billions of surfaces, visor glass, data tiles, home terminals, orbital grids, and then his voice. You watched. Each word arrived in a different language, localized to every viewer. You knew. It stuttered slightly, not from interference, but from time. You did nothing. His eyes were clear, not angry, just done. Earth will not stand with you again. The Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives scrambled to shut down terminals, only to find no controls responded. Every feed was locked, signals hardwired from a source beyond the Council's reach. The display behind Nex zoomed out. What came next was not speech. It was evidence. Thousands of hours of footage, raw, unedited, time-stamped, location verified. Children tested in atmospheric manipulation tanks. Pre-FTL civilizations told their gods had demanded service quotas. Villages strip-mined for neurochemical soil markers. Off-grid bioengineering labs harvesting non-consensual genomes from unrecorded species. And every single clip ended with the same white glyph stamped in the corner. This is your legacy. On Kovari Station, a cluster of trade delegates collapsed into shouting matches. Security forces failed to restore order. Protesters flooded into the lower atriums, their own personal terminals hijacked by the stream. Many of them saw their own world listed among the documented abuses. On Veltrix core, engineers dropped their tools mid-repair as they saw surveillance footage taken from inside their own facilities. Angles that shouldn't have existed, timestamps proving humans had been watching for years. There had never been a warning. There had only been documentation, and now, exposure. Inside the chamber, Nex sat. The others argued, shouted, blamed Earth, blamed each other, threatened trade repercussions, emergency military actions. But Nex said nothing, because he finally understood. This wasn't war, it was judgment. At the rear of the chamber, a younger counselor muttered, "They never asked for anything." Zamfir turned, face drawn. "Because they already knew we'd never give it." Counselor Runvakel slammed a data rod into the floor. "This is digital terrorism." "No," Zam replied. "This is record-keeping." Across the quadrant, riots ignited on worlds that once trusted the Council's ethical image. Entire systems refused to accept outgoing trade shipments. Cargo lanes jammed with rerouted convoys. Civilian governments issued statements condemning the Council's silence, demanding clarity on the footage. Back on Harmonia, guards stood frozen, watching as Vorin's face repeated on wall after wall, his message the same, calm, unwavering. "If you will not protect the innocent, then Earth will." The stream ended with a slow pan through the Tyval Genome Archive, where Earth operatives had filmed elite Council members, bypassing the laws they themselves had written. It ended with a signature. Justice is not a request. It is a refusal to accept anything less. The feeds cut, one by one, until the Council chamber was dark again. Only now, the silence didn't belong to Earth. It belonged to everyone else. Voral Nex stood slowly, his hands hanging at his sides. No data scroll, no agenda, just memory. They built for us, he said aloud, not to the room, but to the wall where Voron's face had just faded. And we buried their warnings in bureaucracy. No one replied. At the far end of the floor, Zam tapped the security panel. Still nothing. Earth hadn't bricked the systems. They had simply stopped talking. Counselor Vakel tried to salvage his composure. We can offer terms. To whom? Nex said. They'll need trade, tech, medical. They don't, Nex interrupted. They were the tech. Across member worlds, broadcast channels struggled to shift the narrative. Some accused Earth of blackmail. Others tried to discredit the footage, until citizens began uploading independent corroboration. Too many details, too many eyewitnesses, too much they had hidden behind layers of diplomatic immunity. On Sirith, a university publicly revoked its research contracts with the Council's scientific arm, declaring the ethics violations too significant to ignore. On Brasserie Theta, mass resignations flooded local government, as planetary AI systems refused to sync with Council updates. Terran-built protocols had disconnected overnight. By morning, the outer systems weren't asking questions, they were choosing sides, and Earth still hadn't spoken again. Not a single message, no emissary, no ship, just the echo of Voron's final words, still archived on a billion devices. Voral Nex remained seated. He didn't look at the Council, he didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. He understood now. Earth's silence wasn't absence, it was judgment, executed with surgical clarity, and the sentence had been passed the day they dismissed Voron's findings. The silence after the broadcast was not recovery, it was erosion. Inside Harmonia's central governance spire, systems flickered like dying neurons. Status logs ran loops without answers. Auto-routing failed. Civilian message relays reprocessed static. Every console flicked error diagnostics, but gave no root cause. Chairman Voral Nex sat unmoving, his breath shallow. They haven't fired a single weapon, said Counselor Zam Fur standing near the collapsed trade terminal. And yet this feels like defeat. Nex didn't answer. His attention was locked on the laser plasma wall, where a slow, deliberate pattern had begun to form. A cascade, sectors dimming, one at a time, then in clusters. Delthar Chain, Near-Axis Core, Council Medical Hub, 9A, Sinari Power Grid, all tied, Zam realized, to representatives who had openly voted against Earth's protection protocols. He felt it before he said it. This isn't mechanical failure, he whispered. This is judgment. 1,000 kilometers above Harmonia, inside an unmarked orbital relay obscured by Council traffic noise, Varen Scythe watched the unfolding collapse with no celebration. The protocol had been dormant for 18 years. Not a virus, not sabotage. An ethical trigger, a cascade coded into the lowest tiers of Earth's exported systems. It had watched, it had waited, and now, it had begun. Scythe tapped into the sequence. Protocol, Vantros, active criteria, compliance failure filter, ethical markers trigger, 91% confirmed, no passwords, no switches, just morality quantified into activation. On a Council logistics station, orbiting Vralt 2, storage drones halted mid-task. Transport bays locked with cargo inside. Oxygen scrubbers in off-world domes paused for calibration and never resumed. All of it happening in facilities where exploitation had passed as policy. Inside the Harmonized Systems Bureau, analyst Brel Karev scanned failure reports, eyes darting across overlapping data clusters. He watched as the logs redacted themselves, not erased but reverted to Earth default silence. Command authority revoked. Only one message repeated in cold gray text. UN recognized accessor, retributive mode, enabled. Karev leaned forward. They built a framework that doesn't answer to us. One of the junior analysts looked up, visibly shaken. Then why did it work for so long? Karev's reply was a whisper. Because we hadn't failed the test, yet. In Sector Gareth Line 3, a terraforming station began reverse seeding. Weather stabilizers altered wind cycles into self-eroding spirals. Evacuation orders couldn't be issued. The communications relay had routed all messages into a null void, by design. All because that station had been a site for adaptive species induction trials, approved by the same committee that dismissed Voron's early reports. Across 12 other systems, similar breakdowns occurred. Each was connected to exploitation histories, sites where the Council had justified moral exceptions to accelerate research, profit, influence. Now those sites went dark, not violently, but with intent. Protests exploded on Tarnan III, where local civilians stormed a regional office, demanding clarity on why life support units had dropped to 62% and would not recalibrate. The local administrator offered no answer. His terminal refused commands. In the crowd, someone had painted 4 words across the front of the building in deep red pigment. Justice is not optional. In Harmonia's central communications tower, command staff attempted to reroute through third-party transceivers, only to discover the entire node architecture had changed. Input signals were being rejected, not by security, but by design inheritance blocks. It's not sabotage, Kariv told Nex when summoned. These systems aren't damaged. They're just choosing not to function. Choosing. Kariv nodded. Earth coded behavior into the code, not commands. Ethics. They mapped decisions, votes, silence, and tied functionality to them. Zem stepped forward, voice tightening. You're saying these failures are linked to Council behavior, not failure, Kariv corrected. Judgment. Viral Nex stared at the laser plasma display as entire supply corridors blinked out. It's Protocol Vantros, he said at last, voice barely audible. I saw the project in old Terran archives. It was theoretical. They proposed it as a response to systemic injustice. It's real now, Kariv said, and it's everywhere. Back on the orbital relay, Scythe logged the activation curve. Everything was progressing within expected tolerances. He didn't smile. This wasn't victory. This was balance restored, one algorithm at a time. Council worlds burned from within, not by fire but vacuum. A slow removal of what Earth had once offered without strings, stability, access, trust. On Korth Prime, hospitals built on Earth templates began auto-locking pharmaceuticals behind clearance walls the staff didn't possess. The AI on board rejected local override. Instead, it looped a single phrase in 40 languages, compliance not met, function withdrawn. Protests turned into full-blown uprisings on Tilvar 9, where planetary defense systems powered down mid-alert drills. Ships remained grounded, as ports failed to authorize launch signatures. One Council representative's escape shuttle failed to recognize his own retinal ID. He was trapped inside his own hangar as outside mobs shattered through the gates. Inside the Harmonized Systems Bureau, Kariv traced the cascade to a single observation node, Earth's ethical vector files. They weren't malware, they were scorecards. Kariv spoke to himself now, voice cracking under the pressure. They measured everything. Every vote, every ignored request, every approval signature. Across the chamber, Nex leaned heavily on the table. We asked them to help build our future, he said, and they watched as we poisoned the foundation. Then they made sure that future couldn't survive without integrity. Silence again, no alarms, no sirens, just absence spreading like a consequence long delayed. Kariv scrolled to the end of the failure chain, where a single timestamp blinked beneath the protocol log. This contingency activates when silence endures beyond ethics. If you find this, the world you lived in has already ended. Vorin. No one spoke after that. Because the code hadn't just measured data, it had remembered who they were. It began with a whisper on Valeth Minor, where a single signal blinked out of the local comnet, an encrypted packet addressed to a Terran frequency. The sender was a physician from the outer district, one who had refused to participate in Council-directed behavioral trials. Her message contained no appeal, only a line. If there's room for those who chose not to look away, we are listening. It was followed by thousands more. On Arkran Delta, a civilian coalition from a planet known for its Council shipyards sent a formal declaration of withdrawal. They had retooled their systems, torn out every Terran-coded framework, and asked only for guidance on how to build anew, without dependence. Earth never responded directly. Instead, those systems soon received packets of unbranded schematics, modular AI libraries, ethical code verifiers, and decentralized reactor protocols. Each embedded with only one watermark, a simple Archon line insignia with 7 stars beneath it. No names, no government seal, only an invitation to self-determination. Across Council space, a shift took root. Worlds that had once been cogs in the galactic machine, minor colonies, marginalized species, shadowed outposts, began forming small local coalitions. They rejected planetary standardization and disconnected from Council-pushed subnetworks. They adopted Earth's distributed models, bypassing central authority, and then they began talking to each other. Within 3 standard weeks, 97 systems had declared alignment with a new political framework, a doctrine, not a dominion. They called it the Ascendancy Pact. Its foundation was not power, but constraint, a framework of interstellar interaction, grounded in protection of the undeveloped, open-source technological exchange, and ethical sovereignty over every layer of data and biology. There were no borders, no fleet hierarchies, just a shared code: power shall never be separated from responsibility. Earth did not lead with a flag. It led with absence. In Sector Zirin 5, a Council-aligned colony woke to find its failing weather stabilizers mysteriously repaired overnight. No ship had landed, no announcement was made, but a sensor buried in its lower crust began broadcasting updates via an Earth-coded relay. The climate algorithm had been rebuilt using clean protocols, no dependencies. It required no Terran oversight to function. The message attached: if you choose to protect, you do not need us to control. In a broadcast chamber on Jernan Core, Counselor Nerif Sol pounded his fist against a decommissioned command deck. The central grid, once projecting Earth-built trade routes, now displayed only a single heading: redirected, no authority detected. We handed them our sky, he muttered, and they gave it back sharpened. Nearby, an aide approached, holding a small slip of aged data paper, something old from the archives. On it a child's drawing, scribbled in blue and red, a beacon, circles around a planet. In the center, words written in crude script: justice or nothing at all. It's spreading, the aide whispered. Not the data, not the protocol, the idea. By the 4th week, over 200 systems had joined the Ascendancy Pact. Some were newly contacted worlds, others were long-time Council territories, whose leaders had resigned, replaced by democratic microgovernments, shaped around the Pact's ethical charter. Earth did not broadcast its involvement, but everywhere the Pact took root, Earth's systems stabilized, unbranded satellites repositioned, storage caches reawakened, AI libraries previously thought defunct rebooted, and began offering upgrades, but only if the planet's record showed it had not participated in prior Council violations. It was support based on history, not requests. The Council, now splintered, staggered to maintain cohesion. 1/3 of its representatives had gone dark. Another third debated reforms, too late and too fractured to matter. The remainder, those still clinging to the illusion of superiority, found themselves unable to influence trade, coordinate defense, or even synchronize clocks. The great network they had relied on had been built atop borrowed trust, and that trust had expired. Inside a diplomatic station near the Taveri border, a former Council diplomat named Sarek Van knelt to examine the crude beacon drawing etched into the side of a refugee transport. He turned to his companion, a young mechanic who had defected months earlier. They didn't conquer us, Sarek said. They watched us fall and offered another road. The mechanic adjusted his tools and glanced toward the void beyond the glass, where Terran ships hovered, not leading convoys, but guarding planetary fringes against piracy and interference. They offered rules that couldn't be bent, he replied, and then stepped aside to see if we could follow them without being told. On Raventh Outpost, a network administrator stared as old Terran hardware, offline since the directive severance, flared to life. The systems booted into a new interface, clean, minimal. A single field blinked at the bottom. Upload your reforms, access will follow. She paused, then typed the Planetary Council's new policy updates: restrictions on genetic manipulation, export controls on planetary resources, civil oversight protocols. The screen accepted the data. Moments later, long-dormant relay systems reactivated, scanning satellites resumed orbit. No message, no congratulations, just re-engagement. Back on Harmonia, the central chamber was nearly empty. Viral Neck stood alone, watching the laser plasma grid quietly reset to black. No more Council routes, no updates, no projected economic summaries, just empty channels. Behind him, one final transmission from the outer ring flickered through. The Pact had reached the Brax system, a region previously marked as Council exclusive. No resistance, no need for pressure, just a new local referendum, overwhelmingly in favor of joining the ascendancy. Next turned off the display and walked to the chamber's edge. Below, the city lights of Harmonia flickered, fewer than before. Earth hadn't made itself the center. The council had made itself irrelevant, and now silence had become a new kind of gravity, unspoken, but inescapable. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council no longer glowed. Its floor, once polished to reflect the lights of 1,000 species, bore the dull gray of systems long uncared for. Cracks etched spiderweb lines through its ceremonial tiles, and the vaulted ceiling lights, half of them flickering, cast broken shadows across abandoned seats. Viral Nex stood in the center of it all. No guards, no aides, just him and the remains of a silence Earth had delivered with unflinching restraint. He walked slowly past vacant platforms. The Torvan Empire's seat had been dismantled, its emblem melted off. The Corran Spire's delegation ring was dark, its memory core wiped. The elevated Arter Loop console still sparked now and then, coughing static before dimming again. It wasn't war that did this. It was a mirror. At the base of the chamber's central tower, Nex activated one of the few working interfaces. A slim heads-up panel rose from the floor, streaked with dust. No login required. Earth had left it unlocked. This one piece only. He played it again. Voran's face, flickering, unfinished, stitched across decades of delay and betrayal. "You watched," Voran said. The voice flat, slow, no longer shocking, just true. "You knew. You did nothing." Then silence, followed by evidence. Genomes dissected, tribes sterilized, minds fractured under psychological experiments sold as uplift modeling. Nex let the feed run. He didn't need to speak. The chamber didn't require speeches now. No debates, no procedural objections. This was the record. Across the outer sectors, ships moved through systems once held under council oversight. But they bore no banners, no official sigils. They were lean, modular vessels, each built differently depending on the worlds they came from. Some were half-organic, pulsing with bioluminescent ribs. Others resembled industrial surveyors. A few carried languages not yet translatable, but every one of them had the same message embedded in their network pings: ascendancy linked, ethics enforced, independent. They weren't warships. No cannons, no escort fleets. But everywhere they passed, exploitation stopped. Miners abandoned forced colonies. Research centers surrendered blacksite archives. Shipping lanes realigned to avoid sovereignty violations. Not because Earth commanded it. Because Earth no longer had to. On Jaretta's moon, a former council depot now served as a local arbitration hub. A young translator there kept a drawing pinned to the wall beside her intake screen, scratched onto fiberplast. The ink faded, but still legible. Justice or nothing at all. Drawn by a Tiveri child. That image now moved faster than legislation ever had. It was painted across embassies, etched into school walls, worn as a pin by engineers across the fringe systems. It didn't belong to Earth anymore. It belonged to everyone who had decided to stop waiting for justice to be approved. Back in the Grand Chamber, Nex collapsed into the council's central chair. It creaked, unused. He looked out over the gallery. His voice broke the stillness for the first time in hours. "I thought we were building order." No one replied. He turned to the last working display. Earth's relay channel was still dark. It had been since the beginning. Not jammed, not denied, just closed. "They never once gave us demands," he muttered. "Never asked for terms, never told us what they wanted." Zame Fur's voice returned to him from memory. "They gave us a chance to choose," he whispered now. "They built in silence, judged in silence." A pause, and now they lead, in silence. He rose. His hands moved behind his back, not in authority, but reflection. Outside, a drone passed the window, ascendancy tag clear on its hull. It made no contact. It logged atmospheric readings, scanned for data inconsistencies, then drifted onward, not surveilling, not occupying, just ensuring the world beneath it wasn't being used. In the orbital fields above Harmonia, the last council flagged ships drifted in holding patterns. Their systems, once interconnected through Earth's substructural lattice, were now sealed in self-isolation. No one was attacking them, but no one was answering them either. On the edge of known space, Sol remained invisible, still cloaked, still silent, but everyone knew it was watching. They had always assumed Earth's silence was weakness, a symptom of inferiority. A planet too new to lead. They had misunderstood. Earth had stayed silent, because it had already calculated the cost of being heard too soon. Inside the chamber, Nex turned off the display. Voron's broadcast faded to black for the final time. He placed the data chip on the table. The seal engraved into its edge caught what little light remained in the room. 7 stars. 1 arc. No name. He didn't try to call Earth again. There was nothing left to say. He walked from the chamber. Alone. Behind him, the door closed. Not locked, but irrelevant. Far beyond Harmonia, beyond the traffic lanes and static clouds of the Council's last holdouts, a Terran observation station adjusted its lens. Inside, a technician logged one final confirmation entry. Judgment confirmed. Activity ceased. Council structure unsustained. A moment later, the station's uplink turned off. Not broken, not corrupted, finished. And from the edge of it all, inside a cloaked field somewhere beyond Saturn's rings, a single Earth vessel watched in silence. It did not transmit. It did not move. It simply recorded. Then gently it folded its wings into the slip corridor and vanished. End transmission.